Ladies and gentlemen, something incredible happened to me. Something powerful. Something that will change the way you see what's coming next. I had a vision, and I'm telling you, it was real. It was from Jesus himself, and he showed me what's coming. The great war, the spiritual and worldly battle that's already beginning right now. Many people don't want to hear it. They'd rather stay asleep, comfortable, pretending everything is fine. But it's not fine. I saw nations rising. I saw darkness spreading like wildfire. But I also saw hope, a light so strong it could not be defeated. And Jesus made it very clear, not everyone will stand when this war reaches its peak. Only the strong, the faithful, the righteous, those who do not bow, who do not sell their soul for comfort or control. They will be the ones left standing in the end. You're going to want to listen carefully tonight, because this isn't just about prophecy. It's not about politics or power. It's about truth. And truth, real truth, is being attacked like never before. The things I'm going to share with you will shake you, wake you, and prepare you for what's ahead. Stay with me. Don't leave, because by the end of this speech, you'll understand why this vision matters and how you can make sure you're standing tall when the dust settles. This is bigger than any election, any government, any army. This is the war for the soul of humanity, and it's already begun. When I tell you that I saw it, I mean I saw it. It wasn't imagination, it wasn't a dream, and it wasn't some idea that came from watching the news or reading a report. It was something higher, something divine. I was shown a vision, clear, strong, undeniable. Jesus stood before me, and there was no question in my heart who he was. The light around him was so pure that it made everything else fade away. There was peace in his presence, but at the same time, there was urgency. I knew he wasn't there to comfort me with sweet words. He was there to warn me, to prepare me for what's coming. He spoke without words, and yet I understood everything. The first thing he showed me was the world, our world, spinning like a globe suspended in darkness. But this darkness wasn't natural. It was moving, creeping, swallowing everything bright. I could see nations trembling. I saw leaders arguing, entire societies tearing themselves apart. There was chaos, confusion, division, not just between countries, but in families, in communities, even inside people's hearts. The light of truth was flickering like a candle in a storm, and it felt like the storm was winning. Then he showed me the cause. I saw forces moving behind the scenes, not men, not armies in uniforms, but spiritual powers. They were feeding lies into the hearts of rulers, whispering into the ears of those in high places, convincing them to trade truth for power, integrity for influence. And I saw millions of ordinary people, good people, blinded by the noise. They were distracted, entertained, comfortable, and unaware that a great battle was already raging around them. I could see symbols of war, but this wasn't a war of missiles or tanks. Not yet. This was the war for souls. The greatest deception of all time was unfolding before my eyes. People were being told what to think, what to fear, what to hate, and they were following blindly. I saw technology being used to control thought, to silence truth, to rewrite reality itself. Jesus looked at me, and though he didn't speak, I knew what he meant. This is the battlefield. Then he lifted his hand, and light spread across the darkness. It wasn't just any light, it was truth. It burned away illusion. In that moment, I saw who was really fighting. There were people rising, small at first, but fearless. They stood for faith, for truth, for freedom. They weren't perfect. They had scars, doubts, and struggles, but their hearts were strong. They were guided not by anger or revenge, but by conviction. I could see that these were the ones chosen to stand in the days ahead. But even as light grew, the darkness fought harder. It gathered more power, more deception. I saw nations fall into confusion, economies collapse, and people lose hope. I saw leaders rising who promised peace but served chaos. I saw laws being changed, values being twisted, faith being mocked. And through all of it, I heard the same whisper, stand firm. St. Jesus showed me that this war would not be won by weapons or speeches, but by hearts that refuse to bow to lies. The strong will not be those with the most money, the most followers, or the loudest voices. The strong will be those who stay rooted in truth when everything around them falls apart. He showed me that many who think they are safe, who believe they are untouchable, will crumble when the shaking begins because their foundation is built on pride, not faith. I saw the faces of those who would stand. Some were known, but most were ordinary people, mothers, fathers, workers, believers who quietly held to what is right even when the world mocked them. They carried a kind of armor you couldn't see but could feel. It was the armor of righteousness, of faith, of unshakable belief. And as they stood, the darkness grew desperate, throwing everything it had at them: fear, confusion, temptation. But they didn't fall. They stood not because they were fearless, but because they were faithful. There was one moment in the vision that shook me to my core. Jesus showed me a great shaking, nations trembling, systems collapsing, the proud being humbled. The mighty towers of corruption fell like sand castles in the tide. People who once mocked truth began to search for it, desperate for something real. And through the chaos, I could see his hand stretched out, offering mercy to those who would turn back, who would finally see what was true all along. This wasn't a story of despair. It was a warning wrapped in hope. Because even though the war is fierce and the darkness strong, the light is stronger still. What I saw was not the end of faith, but the testing of it. The line between good and evil wasn't just out there in governments or corporations. It was inside every heart, and every person would have to choose which side to stand on. I remember the feeling, that mix of awe and burden, when I realized he was showing me not just what would happen, but why. Humanity has turned away from truth, from the divine order, from the light. We've chosen convenience over conviction, pleasure over purpose, and the price for that is a world unprepared for the storm that's about to break. But even in that revelation, there was something powerful, the understanding that no matter how dark it gets, those who stand firm, who hold the line, who keep their faith unbroken, will be the ones left standing when all is said and done. When Jesus revealed the war that is coming, he made it clear that it isn't just a conflict between nations or armies. It's a battle between two forces, light and darkness, and every soul is part of it. I saw two sides rising, not marked by uniforms or flags, but by spirit. On one side stood the light, fierce and unyielding, shining through people who refused to be deceived. On the other stood the darkness, subtle and powerful, feeding on fear, pride, and corruption. These weren't just ideas, they were living realities. I could feel the weight of both forces pressing upon the earth. The side of the light was not the largest, but it was the strongest. It was made up of those who loved truth more than comfort, who would rather be ridiculed than be silent in the face of lies. They were people who understood that faith isn't weakness, that believing in something greater than yourself is the greatest strength of all. They didn't need titles or recognition. They carried conviction, and that conviction burned brighter than any weapon. The side of darkness, however, was cunning. It came dressed in beauty and power. It offered safety, pleasure, and control, promising people everything they desired while slowly taking everything that mattered. I saw how it deceived even the wise, how it used half-truths to twist what was right into what was wrong, how it taught people to celebrate sin and mock righteousness. Its strategy wasn't to destroy truth outright, but to blur it until no one could tell the difference. This war wasn't fought in open fields, but in minds, in hearts, in the quiet choices people make every day. The battlefield was the soul of humanity. Every decision to speak truth or to remain silent, every choice to love or to hate, every act of courage or compromise, it all tipped the balance. The light drew its power from faith, humility, and sacrifice, while the darkness fed on greed, arrogance, and fear. I saw that both sides were calling out, and every person had to choose where to stand. No one could stay neutral. The time for pretending not to see was ending, and the true nature of every heart was beginning to show. The vision showed me that one of the greatest weapons of darkness in this coming war is deception. It doesn't come through obvious evil, but through the quiet manipulation of what people see, hear, and believe. I saw a world completely entangled in illusions where truth had become almost impossible to find. People believed they were free while being controlled at every level. Their thoughts guided, their emotions triggered, their values rewritten without them even realizing it. The deception was not forced upon them. It was sold to them in beautiful packaging: comfort, convenience, entertainment, and progress. I saw media screens glowing in every home, feeding endless noise, not information, not truth, but distraction. The more people watched, the less they questioned. The more they scrolled, the more they slept. Reality became whatever they were told it was. I saw powerful figures using this blindness to reshape the world, to convince people to trade their faith for fear, their convictions for acceptance. It was all carefully designed, all part of the deception that would make humanity forget who they are and who they belong to. Technology played a central role. It became a new altar where people offered their time, their attention, even their souls. It promised connection but delivered control. Every click, every post, every word spoken was watched and measured. Truth speakers were silenced, mocked, or erased. Lies were rewarded and amplified until even the honest began to doubt themselves. It was a world where sin was normalized, where standing for righteousness made you the enemy. Jesus showed me that the deception was so deep that even those who called themselves believers were not immune. Many traded discernment for comfort, confusing emotional peace with spiritual truth. They followed voices that told them what they wanted to hear instead of what they needed to hear. The war for truth was being lost not through violence but through distraction. People were too busy, too entertained, too afraid of standing out. The enemy didn't need to chain them, he only needed to keep them comfortable. The more they loved the illusion, the less they could see the chains forming around their hearts. In the vision, when the darkness grew heavier and the deception spread wider, Jesus made it clear that those who belong to the light must stand firm. There was no more room for silence or hesitation. The call was not for the powerful or the privileged, but for the faithful. I saw that standing firm didn't mean shouting the loudest or fighting with anger. It meant refusing to bend when the world demanded compromise. It meant holding on to truth even when truth was costly. The faithful were not perfect, but they were steadfast. They fell, but they rose again. They were tested, but they did not break. I saw people standing alone in their workplaces, in their families, in their cities, facing ridicule and rejection for refusing to accept lies. Their courage was not born from pride, but from conviction. They understood that faith without action is empty, and that silence in the face of evil is agreement with it. Each act of defiance against darkness became a spark that lit others. One person standing became 2, then 10, then many. The world mocked them, but heaven honored them. Jesus showed me that standing firm would require discernment. The enemy would disguise lies in kindness, evil in compassion, and destruction in progress. Those without spiritual eyes would not see it. The faithful would need to pray deeply, seek wisdom, and trust the word more than their feelings. The time of casual belief was ending. Only those with unshakable roots could withstand what was coming. Standing firm also meant choosing love over hatred. The faithful were not called to fight with the same weapons the darkness used. They were called to fight with truth, with courage, with mercy. Their strength came not from anger, but from faith. Even when they were attacked, they forgave. Even when they were silenced, they kept speaking. I saw that their faith was like a wall that could not be breached. The storms raged, the world shifted, but they stood. Their power came from knowing who they served and what they stood for. And that knowledge made them unmovable in a world that was collapsing around them. In the final part of the vision, I saw that after all the shaking, after the chaos and confusion had run their course, a great calm began to rise. The war was fierce, but it was never without purpose. Jesus showed me that in the end, truth would not just survive, it would reign. The darkness that seemed unstoppable began to crumble under the weight of its own lies. Every false promise, every corrupt system, every deceitful power was exposed for what it truly was. The light did not fight with violence, it simply revealed what had been hidden. When the truth was unveiled, the shadows lost their power. I saw those who had stood firm through the storm. They were weary, scarred, but still shining. Their faith had been refined like gold through fire. The trials that were meant to destroy them had only made them stronger. They were the ones who had refused to bow, who had chosen integrity over comfort, faith over fear. When the dust cleared, they were the ones left standing. Their reward was not worldly riches or titles, but peace. The deep, unshakable peace that comes only from knowing they had been faithful to the end. The vision showed me the faces of people who had once been overlooked, the humble, the quiet, the ones who had endured without recognition. They were lifted up, honored by heaven, their names written in light. The powerful who had built their kingdoms on deception were gone, their voices silenced, their influence erased. What remained was a new beginning, one built on truth, justice, and the presence of God that filled the earth like the sunrise after a long night. I saw the faithful gathered together, their hearts united, their eyes lifted. The world had been remade not by force but by faith. The victory did not belong to the loudest or the richest, but to those who had trusted when everything else had failed. The kingdom they had hoped for was not distant or symbolic. It was real, alive, and unshakable. Truth had triumphed, light had overcome, and every promise that had ever been spoken by Jesus was fulfilled before their eyes. I act